Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's virtual film screening and panel discussion. My name is Alyssa Greenberg, and I'm the Community Engagement Director at Toledo Opera. We have convened a very exciting and dynamic group of artists, scholars, and Toledo community members to share their stories ahead of Toledo Opera's production of Blue next week on Friday, August 26th and Sunday, August 28th at the Valentine Theater. Before we go any further, we wish to thank our generous supporters, Owens Corning, Ohio Humanities, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Greater Toledo Community Foundation. And thank you to the incredible team at Madhouse Creative who collaborated with us on the documentary film airing tonight. At Toledo Opera, we take every opportunity to share the magic of opera with you at our events. This evening, we will stream a piece performed by the Blue casts of the Glimmerglass Festival and Washington National Opera. This piece was led by mezzo-soprano Brianna Hunter and bass Kenneth Kellogg and supported by the Glimmerglass Festival. This poignant performance of The Talk and Lay My Burden Down from Blue honors the pain of a long list of victims and calls for a just, safer world for Black lives. Kenneth Kellogg in the role of the father and Gordon Hawkins in the role of the Reverend performed in the original Glimmerglass cast and will be on stage here in Toledo. In fact, they are in Toledo right now, and today's rehearsal wrapped up just an hour ago. Thank you to Glimmerglass for permitting us to air this piece tonight. The piece concludes with a list of organizations working for racial justice that Glimmerglass suggests you support, and to that list we would add local groups including the Community Solidarity Response Network, the NAACP Toledo branch, and Brave in Bowling Green. Next, we will air our documentary film Blue, Stories from Toledo. Blue was performed in Detroit last September, recently in Seattle and Pittsburgh, and will of course be performed in Toledo later this month, and next abroad in England and the Netherlands. The concept behind this film is that this opera is going to land differently in every city, every country, shaped by the lived experiences of that place's residents. And this film creates a dialogue between Toledoans who have lived experience with the police, including 3 retired Black law enforcement and experts on the opera Blue. Thank you to all of our film's storytellers, one of whom joins us in tonight's dialogue. After the films, the next face you see will be Dr. Naomi Andre, Professor Emerita at the University of Michigan and recently announced as the David G. Frey Distinguished Professor in Music at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, who will be our moderator this evening. Dr. Andre will be joined by 4 panelists, Tazewell Thompson, who wrote the libretto for Blue and is also directing Toledo Opera's production. You'll see him in the documentary film as well. Maestro Chelsea Tipton II, who will be conducting Blue, Crystal Harris, who will also be in the film, and Kathy Tucker, 2 Toledo community leaders and mothers whose personal lived experiences resonate deeply with the opera Blue. Thank you to our moderator and panelists for joining us tonight and to all of you for being here. We hope you will jump into the chat and share your thoughts and comments and questions with your fellow audience members. And now we present the film screening.
Stay alive. That's what you're supposed to do.
You a Black boy.
A walking, moving target.
A Black boy.
Take off the hoodie.
The hoodie. The hoodie.
The hoodie.
The hoodie.
The hoodie.
Hoodie.
The hoodie.
The hoodie.
Sun.
The light is turning amber.
Run.
Run across the street.
No, don't run.
Walk.
Don't walk.
Don't walk.
Walk.
Don't. Don't wear your ball cap backwards.
Don't wear a hoodie.
Don't carry shiny objects.
Don't get a tattoo.
Don't pierce your ears.
Don't shave your head.
Don't get an afro.
Don't make a fist.
Don't sit on the curb.
Don't sit on the hood of the car.
Don't wear cornrows.
Don't look the man in the eye.
Look the man in the eye.
Don't make quick movements.
Don't put your hands in your pockets.
Don't remove your shirt.
Don't lie on the grass.
Don't wear sunglasses.
Don't spit.
Don't chew.
Don't laugh.
Don't bounce.
Have a photo ID.
Have a driver's license.
social security card.
Voter registration.
Passport.
Dog tag.
Library card.
Don't run.
Don't run.
Don't run. Don't.
You are black eye. We sing, Christ wore the crown of thorns. Christ wore the crown of thorns. Christ wore the crown of thorns. Trust and dare. Christ wore the crown. My Christ wore the crown. My Christ wore the crown. Trust and pray. My Christ wore the crown. My Christ wore the crown. My Christ wore the crown. My lay my burden down. Lay my burden down. I lay my burden down. I ain't gonna study war no more. I lay my burden down. I lay my burden down. I lay my burden down. I ain't gonna study. I ain't gonna study.
Take care of my boy. Look out for him. Welcome him to your house, to his new room in heaven.
Let him lie deep in the valleys and gorges, in the palm of your hands. Find him a room with a galaxy burst of stars.
He needs to sleep with the light on.
Blue is an opera about a middle-class family living in Harlem, African American. The father in the family is a police officer, and they have a teenage son, and he's a political activist, much to the nervousness of his mother and father. From the perspective of the teenage son, he's living with the enemy. He doesn't quite understand why he says, and he says it in the opera, how is it possible that I would have a father who is a police officer? He derides his father, that his father could actually wear what he considers a clown suit for the white man. The audiences will see these Black police officers as human beings who hurt, who love, who cry, who care, who are courageous, who are responsible, who are fathers, who are very concerned, deeply concerned about how they are perceived throughout the community. To me, the story is about what happens, what fate befalls this African American family living in Harlem, New York City, USA, at a time where Black lives seem to be at a premium. And for this young man, this young teenage boy, he is a moving target in America, being an African American boy. He is an endangered species. This family just wanted to have a life and watch their son become a man, and that maybe their son will give them grandchildren, or maybe not, but that this child needed to have a full life. How will they go on? How will they be able to face a day without their son? It's how the community comes together to support them through love and loss and grief and love and survival and love.
James Dickerson. I am a photographer. I walk around Toledo. I meet, tons of people. I talk to them wherever I can because I want to preserve those things and I want to document the Black and Brown experience here. A few of us went out because we just had lost like a family member, but we were in there for literally 35 minutes and a fight broke out. My girlfriend at the time actually called the police. There's this natural response when you see, a group of Black people and Mexicans in a parking lot, and their instinct is so reactive. There was a tussle, and I end up, on the receiving end of tasers. So I got tasered 4 times, 2 on each side, and eventually I had my arm broken. I woke up, asking for water. And, it's like 3 a.m. at this time, and my parents luckily were there. And several Black folks had died in jail due to tasers. They tried to help me to go get some water because that's all I wanted. And I collapsed in the middle of this hallway from a heart attack. My son at the time was only 30 days old. So there's the threat of not being able to see him again. That experience never improved. After that, it became tough. It was tough for me for the next 10 years or so, I would not go out anywhere. You couldn't catch me anywhere in Toledo. So that to constantly have to walk around with that fear that there is something that I may be doing, even if it's totally innocent, just walking.
Initially, I've always been involved with anti-police brutality. It was honestly like such a good experience until TPD decided to escalate and continually push their community and assault their community to the point where we did not feel safe in downtown anymore. We were here to make our voices heard, to, yes, cause a little bit of disruption because that's what protests are for. I irritated an officer with words. I wasn't violent in any way. I wasn't threatening in any way. And the officer in the turret waited until he was about 10 feet in front of me to shoot directly at my leg. And I had to figure out how to be a mom again, how to be me again. I felt so lost, trying to like validate who I am, validate that I didn't deserve to be shot. I'm trying to cook, clean, care for my child, run around with her, dance like we used to, and I couldn't. If we don't hold them accountable, I don't want my daughter 20 years from now protesting the same thing, or for someone else's rights getting shot downtown because those that we put in a position of power still feel that they can do anything to their community and get away with it. I refuse to allow that to happen. So
when I went through the police academy, I was a first-time family police officer. There's nobody in my family that's a police officer. You can go all the way back in my history. I can't find a police officer anywhere in my family. I thought about the kids of police officers that came on the department when we did, that had their dad, their uncle, their grandpa, their mother, their sister. When they left the academy, they could go home and be counseled. I said, we need to create kind of a family for people who don't have the benefit of being, a generational police officer. They had so much adversity from people around them, their friends, their family who, didn't have a very good image of police. My comment to people who would say, why would I want to be a police officer? If you don't, who will? When you're dealing with people of color, you got to have people of color involved in your decision making, because there's some things that could happen that you have no clue about somebody's culture. We walk candidates through the process just like a dad would do his son, or an uncle would do his niece. Our focus is to get more Black officers in the decision-making level of the police department.
I'm David Ross. I'm a community activist, artist, and I also work in arts administration for the Toledo Arts Commission. Behind me is bricks and rubble from a former mural being behind me, and that was supposed to be struck by lightning. Myself and an artist by the name of Van Muzi. It's the home of our mural for George Floyd. What it means to the community, I felt like it was just something that people would just cherish because of what happened. Him being killed and symbolizing the awareness around the racism that took place that day. Everybody came together, but the unique thing about that day, to me, was a lot of all different walks of life and races experience some of the things we go through every day as Black people. Being maced and hit with pellets and stuff like that, just because you voicing your opinion. You know what I mean? That type of treatment was everybody experienced it, but we always experienced it. For me, it was trying to preserve the fact that we all came together to fight for his justice. Somebody called me and said they just blew up, they put a bomb on the mural. That's how I got it, and I calmly drove over here because when that happened, I said to myself, it don't matter if it was the earth, a lightning, or a bomb. The abuse and the verbal hatred and racism that came from this mural, might as well put a bomb on it. It don't matter what did it. Y'all wanted it to be done so bad, you know what I mean? Racial profiling shit be eliminated from the police force. And how do you explain to a kid that a situation, a traffic stop can end and them being, not around no more, them losing their life? On a police officer end, I'm just gonna say that assess your mind to make sure you actually know that every walk of life matters equally.
Dr. Marvin Whitfield. I am the CEO and founder of Blue Force Mobile Training Team, and also the CEO of Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Northwestern Ohio. I can tell you as a police officer, I can't tell you how many times I've been called to sell out. But as a person of color, I can't tell you how many times I've been profiled. So I'm so used to it now, getting stopped is just part of it. Police officers are most likely to be killed by people not of color versus people of color. Not saying that people not of color are a bigger threat, it's just based on the number. The data showed that a lot of these young males and females, people in the community of color, are victims themselves that put them in spaces to where they are committing certain crimes or they're over-policed. And so one thing I want to look at and research later on is from the officer's perspective, because I was self-reflected also in my space. A lot of some of my most violent confrontations hand to hand was when I was interacting with whites. Once again, I'm saying they're more, prone to violence, there's more of them. Because my bias is my guard was down. Oh, they white, I can handle them, it's no big threat. Because sometimes when we don't perceive something as a threat because our bias, they become a threat to us even more. We never see it coming. But when I have a young black male, because my biases back then, I was always on guard. And so even just having that understanding and minimizing those biases may even save not only people of color lives who may not be committing a crime or doing anything to the threat to where their life should be taken, but also to save officers' lives.
My name is Tanasia Loudermill. I am a poet, activist, and filmmaker. But when it comes to protests these days, I just kind of take my camera and shoot. I saw a police car pull up to the corner at the light. I watched 2 water bottles get thrown at the cop car, and somebody went up and spray painted the back of it. Felt like within the next 30 seconds, a tank showed up and tear gas was thrown. While I was taking a video, I had to put my camera down and in my bag, and 2 ladies that I didn't know came up to me with a baking soda and water solution for me to put in my eyes to counteract the tear gas because I couldn't open them. There was a point in the video where when I was watching it back where it just goes black.
Are you on your phone?
Right now, yeah, but...
With us? I mean, you want to walk this way with us?
Sure, thank you. Let me... And from then on, it was just running, a lot of running. With how quickly the tank and the riot cops showed up, it was almost like they were waiting for an excuse to bring that stuff out. That's what it at least seemed like. Because, a couple guys throw some water bottles and spray paint a cop car, that doesn't mean you need to tear gas and shoot bullets in crowds of, hundreds of people. I hope that people can see and learn some of these experiences of interactions with police, with people of color, and be able to empathize with that if they've never gone through it themselves, at least be able to use empathy and sort of put themselves in that place to see, why we have the qualms with the institution of law enforcement that we do.
My name is Shirley Green. I am a retired police officer. I was a police officer with the city of Toledo for 26 years. I have a picture of my dad in my living room at home, and it's in his rookie uniform. It's his rookie police picture. And looking at some of the things that have occurred over the last years involving police officers and particularly Black men, I think to myself, what would he think right now? All the work that they did, himself working the street and as a member of the African American Police League, what would he think about going backwards like we are? And how do we fix that? He would think we need to figure out a way to recruit and hire more officers of color because those numbers have gone down. The work that officers of color do within police departments and out in their community is very, very important. Officers of color, Black police officers, they have, which is sad, but it seems sometimes they have this additional burden to be this liaison between their police agency and the community that they came from. I think, having said that, if you talk to African American police officers, they can probably give you some pretty good ideas of how to fix things because they see it from both sides. And if anything comes out of this, I think that's important, that to talk to African American police officers and ask them, what do you think? What do you think we can do?
I'm Crystal Harris. I am the mother of Christopher Harris. A working mom, raised 4 children by myself. I teach them to love on everybody. Just do that saying of do unto others as you have them do unto you is so solid. Me having 3 black males, my story of raising my babies is different. A lot of my family was out here, of course, but they had this whole perimeter surrounded, cut off. They was going back and forth. They was talking, and the whole thing was my son his whole thing that he kept saying was, "There's 60 cops out here with 60 guns. I have 2, and they trying to kill me for writing Jesus is Black on the church." They wouldn't let me come to the front of the house. That's where I wanted to stand so he can see me. He was going through mental illness. He was just now learning, accepting it himself. I wanted the police to see the kind of relationship that me and my family, me and my children have. Because once we come together, he calms down and he'll break down and just cry in a ball and be like, what's happening to me? Again, this is something we deal with Chris in our home all the time. The police wasn't listening to that. And they told me after 15 minutes of him being quiet and not responding to them is what made them make the decision to throw 26 bombs of tear gas in my home. And again, this one lady officer that I kept communicating with said, "Oh, ma'am, it's okay. It's okay. It's just the tear gas." Went silent. The thing went silent. After that, all you hear is this ray of bullets. Just pop, pop, pop. I've heard people say that it rips your heart. I feel like my heart, like a suction cup, just said, it took my breath away. I couldn't even say anything. I couldn't do nothing. I could not protect him. I could not. A mother is supposed to protect their child. They took all my rights away from me to protect him. Because a mother know their child. It's just like having a decent day one day and the next day your whole world changed, but it's spiraling by the minute, going down. How do you grieve? How do you do anything when you got all this happening one time and I got my kids? And I was numb to a lot of things, but I had to make decisions through everything. I had to keep the ball rolling. I had to find a roof for me and my daughter. It's so crazy, but after watching my son be killed on my front porch, my first home that I went out to buy, doors was opening. I'm going to work every day. I'm doing what they say we're supposed to do, I'm trying to build the white picket fence, trying to have, my kids go off to school, start their own families, me one day be able to see a grandchild, all of the above. When we coming up in school, we told that's the American dream. But I guess, is it for everybody or not? I live in America. I was born into this place. And why can't my family have the same opportunity if we're willing to work to get it?
Operas started telling Black stories in new ways. Blue, when it was just being written, is just about a middle-class family. The setting of the opera is contemporary right now. And it's really, there's a feeling of It's not always so friendly for young Black boys, especially as they get older. And at the heart of the opera, there's let's grapple with what do we do with so many Black young men, and there are also Black women who are being profiled and who end up dying not from anything that they've done on their own. How do we handle this? For those of you who are brand new to opera, this is an opera I'd say come to. This, regardless of your see these characters who feel like people you might just encounter in your life. You probably know a lot of these people, and they're all Black. And it's amazing. It's wonderful. I'd never seen that on the stage as a Black woman. I didn't realize what I had been missing. This is an opera to come to because it is right about now.
Blue is the story of a family tragedy and a national reckoning. Presented by Toledo Opera at the Valentine Theater. Tickets available by phone at 419-255-SING and online at toledoopera.org.
It is really a pleasure to be here, and that opening statements that were by the Blue cast and also this documentary that Toledo Opera has made are so powerful. And I've seen some of it, but not all of it. So as you all are watching this, I'm feeling like I'm reacting, but I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm joined by a panel of two people who are involved with putting the opera on, two creatives, and two wonderful women from the community. I'm joined by Tazwell Thompson, who is the librettist and stage director, Chelsea Tipton II, who is the conductor, Crystal Harris, and Kathy Tucker, who are two women, two mothers, two members of the Toledo community. I'm right now, we're all very close to Toledo. Some people are in Toledo. I'm in my home in Ann Arbor, but I will be in Toledo starting next week as the events pick up. Rather than my saying a whole lot right now, I want to say just a couple of words and then get some reactions from our panelists from having seen these two documentaries, these two productions. I want to say that we represent right here on this, in this Zoom cyberspace, we represent a wide cross-section of Black folks. We represent people you see in your everyday lives. We're the people conducting the music you hear on the radio and on CDs. We're the people in the bank and running the bank. We're the people working behind the scenes. We're the teachers in the university. We're the people whose homes your kids flock to in the neighborhood. And we're the people buying groceries standing right next to you. We are a part of the larger community represented in Toledo and beyond. And it is just a point right now for us to talk about this, this opera, the event of it coming up, respond to the documentary, and there will be a time afterwards where people can type in questions and we can get some interaction and feedback. I'm thinking that, and I tried to put a few words in there because those documentaries are powerful, and to have us come down. Tazwell and Crystal, you're in the documentary and you speak so beautifully. Thank you. Chelsea and Kathy, thank you so much for being with us to make this happen. When we got together and spoke a little bit last week about this presentation, we didn't really set an order of who would jump in first. And I'm wondering if I could suggest someone, but I'm wondering if somebody just wants to pop in and say a little bit about who you are in the community and reactions to these documentaries we've just seen. I know it's awful. As a teacher, I know it's tough. Tazwell, I get the sense you were just about to say something.
I was. I found the documentaries just staggeringly brilliant and very powerful. And emotionally draining, upsetting, hopeful, humane, inhumane, wildly out of control in terms of where we are as a country and how we are not appreciated as a people, the fragility of Black life, the unitedness of Black life, of neighbors, of friends, and of shared experiences. Many of those shared experiences are unfortunately tragic, and there are dreams and hopes and wishes that are dashed to pieces. And yet we, as Maya Angelou would say, I hope it's Maya Angelou, and still I rise.
Yes.
And I rise. And it has been very difficult for me, just personally, because I live in Harlem. I'm here now in Toledo, which I love being here because I love my cast at Toledo Opera for Blue. Extraordinary, talented human beings, artists who are so touched by what they have to sing because they know these people. But in my community of Harlem, during the pandemic, I live across the street from a resident home for retirees and for those who are too old to fend for themselves. And there was a constant siren of bodies being taken away. And in that community also, there are small businesses, wonderful businesses, little restaurants and bodegas and variety stores and groceries, little shopping areas. And on either side of where I live are elementary schools. So I have a whole infusion of life. And in that community is a Black police officer that I met who, when I was writing Blue, and I wanted to get to know him a little more. I would see him. Actually, he has 2 children. He has a daughter who dotes on him, who just adores him. And I can see that from my window. And then there is his teenage son, who is embarrassed and ashamed that his father is a police officer. So all of that was fodder for me to put in the opera. But I bring this up because now I see that my community that was devastated by the pandemic, how we all got together and we helped each other get through the various community members in that home who were dying. And 3 blocks away from where I live is a food pantry. And I would bring over young students from the Manhattan School of Music who would sing selections from opera, especially around the holidays, but even more so when we were going through the pandemic. And it was my way of cheering up the community and the long lines that were waiting for a bag of groceries to get themselves through COVID, which really put a shell shock on their budgets. The pantry's always been there, but now it was even more so. So when I left to come here, I looked around and everything is coming back because we are people who, and still I rise. And so seeing that documentary it deflated me for a moment and it made me feel really achingly bad, but I also have hope. We're rehearsing Blue, and the community in Toledo has been very welcoming. I've let everybody know in the hotel. And I have these wonderful cleaning ladies who they're all clamoring to see the opera. I have to sum it up.
Excellent. You go.
I've said a lot and I've taken up too much time.
Not at all.
That's all I have to say for now, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Tazwell. It is so great to hear sort of you bring us all together from what was happening in your community to what's happening now. Please feel free. There's a chat, I think. So if people want to put comments in, feel free because we want to get other people's voices. I'm wondering where we should. Oh, sorry. I was on the private chat. I'm on the comments now. Yay. Thank you, people, for writing in the comments. And please feel free to do this. And panelists, feel free to look at these comments. I'm wondering if we want to go to Chelsea to talk a little bit about the opera, or Kathy or Crystal. Do you want to give a little bit about being in the Toledo community? Who wants to jump in next?
I will say, can you hear me by chance?
Yes, we can. You're great.
Good. I was having a few little audio problems a little bit earlier. First of all, it's wonderful to be back in Toledo. I was with the Toledo Symphony for 7 years as their resident conductor. And so I didn't work with the opera at that time, but Toledo was a transformative time for me when I was here as a conductor. And so I've been gone for about 12 years. I live down in Texas now, outside of Houston. And to be back here and to be part of this experience with Tazwell and the opera company here has been just remarkable. One thing I will say about the documentary that you just aired, it tells the stories. So oftentimes we focus on headlines, we focus on clickbait, we focus on just the surface of things. But the opera, as well as the documentary you all just presented, it goes beyond. It goes, how do you deal with these events in your life when you've been assaulted, when you've been wronged in this way, and the emotions that go with it. This is an incredibly powerful, emotional opera. And I know as a Black man myself, conducting it, even today in rehearsal, I was just so moved at different points. And it doesn't focus on the violence. It focuses on how you deal with the aftermath. And that's often lost in the headlines that we see that come out around the country. So opera should be about feeling, and sometimes those feelings are beauty. They are beautiful moments in this opera, just beautiful arioso and lyrical moments throughout the opera, especially in the first act. But art in general should cause you to feel something. And this, if you come to and have this experience with us, it's great to say, come to the show, have a great show and everything. No, you should come to have an experience. You will be moved by this opera, regardless of what your background will be, because the pain of loss, the pain of losing someone close to you, we can all relate to that. And we all have dealt with that in our own way. And so those stories we just heard illustrated how we do the best we can. There's no playbook. All of our lives are so different. And we were just shown several segments of different people and their experiences. And you'll see that same experience in a musical art form with the opera blues. So I want people to come out and share in this experience with us.
You are actually the perfect person to how this sort of segues, as Tazwell is somebody who's new to Toledo. You are somebody who used to be rooted right in Toledo, and so part of the community, and you have this experience of being in other places, most recently for the past decade or so in Texas. This idea of feeling and what opera and the arts get to do, I think of it as almost, and I don't want to be off-putting at all, but as a sacred space, sacred in that there's no specific dogma religion being spoken. You can believe whatever you want to believe, but think of it, the lights go down, our devices usually are off, and we're in communion, quietly paying attention, and we're there listening and a part of it. We're still very much in community, and yet we're silent as we're connected. There's a real special thing that we have in an opera performance, and we get to also feel the that we're not going through it alone. There's a type of catharsis. What's been happening lately with the police, unfortunately, is not new. However, it has become, due to cell phones and technology, in our world even more. And so we need Blue so we can experience these things together. So yes, as you know, the spoiler alert is that there is some heavy stuff that happens in Blue. Yet that first act, it's in 2 acts. That first act is black joy. That stuff is amazing. After I've been fortunate to be connected with this opera when it was going through workshops. And after I sat in the workshop in August of 2018, a year before it premiered at the Glimmerglass Opera in August of 2019, seeing it for the first time, that first act, I was actually, and this is crazy because, I'm an opera scholar, I don't cry that much. I was crying because I was, for the first time, in a community. My community, those girlfriends up on stage and the police buddies. Finally, I'm in opera. I'm part, it felt like that, I'm just sitting and watching, but which is a good thing. But there's a sense of a community that's there. And I'm using this as a segue to bring in the people who live in Toledo and who are part, the women who are, I hope, as you watch this opera, that you'll be like, you'll have a similar reaction that I had, like, oh my gosh, I know those girlfriends. I'm one of them. They are people in my contacts. I'm wondering if, Kathy, if you'd like to jump in, or Crystal, if you'd like to jump in now about sort of this community element of Toledo, and feel free to respond to the documentaries we just saw.
Sure, I'll go next.
Terrific, Crystal.
Crystal, I'm Christopher's mom. I've been in Toledo majority of my life, and I played a big role in our city from my childhood, doing marching bands, church events, choir. And I was always into the musical thing. I have a family history of music. Um, the role I played in the community, again with marching bands, you're talking 100 kids or more at a time. There are some key names of like Joyful Noise. Over at Mount Pilgrim Church on Door Street, I used to be over the Joyful Noise ministry there. And then
What's your instrument?
I'm sorry?
What's your instrument?
Oh, well, I played violin when I was in school, but yeah, I'm more of a vocal person. My kids are vocals. They play keyboard. My son, I was taking away. He was the big music man. He can play instrument. But most of them played drums because my father's in percussion, and he played jazz for many places. He traveled all over, even to Japan. So again, staff, but as far as the community, coaching basketball with the kids, I was that they call me Mom Dukes. I have a nickname of Mom Duke. A lot of kids, I don't like, I just like to remain humble, but they would come to my home a lot. My home was the house that everybody would come to with the summer parties, a bunch of young men, black males at that. And I had the girls too. But I always got involved. I get out there with kids and I'll do whatever sports and singing, and that was me. All the football games, I was there, the big cheerleader. Everywhere I can get involved, that's Crystal. My spirit changed and things changed after my son was taken away. It's been a rough road, and when I heard the testimony, it just resonated with my spirit because I'm struggling with trying to get back to that lady that everybody came to. I was like a safe house in the community to a lot of kids in so many ways, and it's difficult because when you trying to prepare, you want to give resources for people to go to.
Yes.
And at one point, I would call the police to come and help. And I'm struggling with calling on them to help with anything because of how things was handled. So it's a struggle for me, and I'm staying in prayer to God to continue to move in my life. And it's the way my son lived his life is that keeping me humble and keeping me focused, and my antennas up, praying to God walk me through this process because it's been difficult. But the love that we all have in the family has kept me encouraged and bite down through all the pain. You know, that's the difficult part for me. The pain, swallowing pain and standing still and standing, trying to move forward because there's still so many black males out there. All of our people, period, in our urban neighborhood, the community, we still need examples, and we're those examples are falling off. They're
Yeah.
tired, because sometimes they feel like they're in the race by themselves. Just depends on the area that they're growing up in. How certain situations be handled. It's kind of tough.
Yeah.
Um, in our school here in Toledo, they used to have police in the school systems, and that has changed a lot. It's changed. Believe it or not, he was going to go to a school in our, and one of the police officers came to my front door and said, "You know what? I like my son's record. He's a good kid. We're going to take him over here to this other. I would personally take him to school every day to make sure he gets, a better education. When education should have been the same all the way across the board, but we had to try to get it, and they were willing to do that for him. So I put in the police force, but the experience I had is the way everything was handled, and even the response from the city afterwards is rough. It's very hard, and I'm still trying to find ways to deal with it. But
Crystal, thank you. You say you look for models, and yet I get the sense that sometimes we're our own models in ways. Although I get the sense you probably also have, since you were that family where kids would come over, and I'm sure their parents noticed too. And so I hope there's a community that's been around there for you and what you're doing. I remember in a conversation we had just last week, and one of the points that as we were getting to know each other, all of us, you talked about how important it is for the community to be known with the law enforcement. And that example you just gave about how you would be the person who would sort of, the community and the police, like you all knew each other, and how somebody was helping Chris go to when it seems like it was necessary. He needed a little sort of help in getting to a safe space. Your son, Chris, had, and you've mentioned this, mental illness. And I want to tell you about something that I just heard of this morning, and I'm mentioning it to everyone. In my car in NPR, there's this new service. I found this on the state Council of State Governments website, and I heard about this on at NPR. There's going to be a new national number in addition to 911 when you call for a police emergency. There was legislation passed in June just recently, which is 988. I don't know if anybody's heard about this. 988. It's only funded. In fact, the legislation has been passed in June, and then I think in July it started being rolled out. It's only in 13 states where it's being funded. New York is on that list. Sadly, Toledo and Michigan are not yet on this. But I urge people to look into this 988. You can just sort of Google it as a mental health hotline. On the what I heard this morning in NPR, it was a great interview, and I can't remember exactly all who was there, but there was a Black woman who is a mental health worker, a therapist, and she said, "I'm still concerned about this because we want to make sure that it's still being a helpful thing. If you call this number, are you going to be tracked? What's going to happen?" And it sounds like that information is still coming out. So the caution is still needed. But I just remember from this conversation how important, Crystal, you were saying how it's important for law enforcement to be aware of the community and to have more mental health training. And I know other people
Yeah.
have talked about that.
Yes. As a parent, one of the biggest struggles I had when my son was alive was me trying to get him to go and get himself checked because he was over 18.
Oh.
Call around, and there's a Zeph Center right up the street from our home. And when you call around and try to get him placement or just to get him checked, they want that person to come in themselves and sign over and sign himself in. You know, some people do not understand that mental illness is not a 24/7 thing where they're in that rage stage or that upsetting stage or that discomfort stage at all times. Sometimes they might be in the right frame of mind and they having a decent day, but even in his decent day, when he thought about it, he said, "Mom, all they're going to do is shoot me up, and I'm a," he
And
felt
that's a fair concern.
medicine. And he was like, and I'll be just sitting in the room. And he felt like he wasn't going to get any help. So he tried to stay in his word, read the Bible. He was doing that. He was standing on the corner of the signs, just trying to spread the word of the gospel, what he knew as coming up. But that wasn't enough for him. That didn't help him in this case because the way the situation ended up. But I wish there was a way where some laws could be changed where we as parents know our children well enough where, and again, the relationship with the police, this officer knew me in the community, we could have had a conversation where he understands me instead of saying, well, we've had training on this. Come to find out it was maybe a week or two training.
It's not
That's
enough.
not enough training for something like to that capacity because again, I'm gonna put both my son and Officer Stalker's name in there because the police officer was killed as well. And he was only 24. My son was 27. So we lost two young lives that could have been spared had it been handled. I strongly feel that way.
Crystal, your voice is so important, and I really appreciate your sharing this with us because I know this. I don't know personally, but we are all being affected in some ways, and you are the voice in the wilderness, one of the voices telling us and helping us. I see in the comments, thank you, Janelle and Petronella, for talking about the possibility of this 988 line. I think it is connected with suicide prevention, and I think it's a beginning of maybe addressing some of these issues. Kathy, you're somebody who lives in the community and you have a special view in terms of you're also a mom. You have a husband who is connected with a lot of these issues with police enforcement and also more broadly. Feel free to jump in or please jump in and any of that plus the documentary comments, ideas.
Well, I'm honored, and it's such a pleasure to be sharing this virtual platform with so many powerful people, and your stories are inspiring. I was having lunch with an old friend, and I hadn't had lunch with her, talked to her in over a decade. We were talking, and she sits on the board. Her name is Maureen Brown of the Opera. And just in talking, she brings up Blue, and she's explaining to me the storyline. And I immediately froze because my husband, he is a African-American police officer who recently early retired, but he was the first and only African-American officer in his department. And when she was giving me the storyline, I felt myself choking up because I said, first, whoa, this is my life. I'm like, Maureen doesn't even know that she is reflecting, mirroring my life back to me. But then it hit me. I said, the brilliancy of placing this in an opera, because the emotional, laborious, it's so intense to be Black and blue. And it could only be all of these emotions that Crystal's talking about, that Tazwell is talking about, that I will share, can only be quantified in the form of art and opera. You cannot articulate it. And most certainly the Black man, because of everything they've been through in the outer Teflon shell they are forced to walk around with in society, they cannot articulate the feeling. And when Maury was telling me about the wife, and there's also that dichotomy there. I see my husband and how proud he is to wear the uniform. But I see when he comes home, and I think the way that he describes it is really chilling. And it's like a broken man who is trying to hold all of these cracks together. He grew up in Toledo, in a neighborhood where when the crack epidemic happened, and he acquired PTSD at a young age because of what he saw and experienced. And he should have, I was just saying this a few days ago, I said, you should have died 12 times over. But not only did he move forward and not succumb, because he should have, all of these young men you see, they don't have a choice. You think they have a choice, they don't have a choice. It's easy to say. But somehow, and I believe because of the strength of his mother, he persevered. And then he put the uniform on. And it sounds good. But I know what it's like when he comes home, and every night I'm having a pep talk with him. I'm like, you can do it. You can go to work today. It's okay. And I'll tell you, the turning point is I could tell it was tough, and I could see it busting through the seams. And I'm like, okay, how do I help hold them together? And then when George Floyd happened, when I tell you, I'm like, I don't think he can go back to work. And he's looking at me. He's like, I don't know if I can do it. It's not because I don't love my community. He said, Kathy, it's hard. He says, how can I put this on? How can I put this on and go back? But then he's like, how can I not? So when you think about that first documentary that came up, I think this is what I say about music. All of the voices that you're hearing, the emotions, that is what it feels like. We have 3 Black sons. I have a 10-year-old son, okay? He weighs 108 pounds, wears a size 8 in men's. He's pure body mass. And he just asked me the other day, he says, I want to get locks. And it's crazy the things you have to think of. And the first thing I feel is fear. Because I said, I don't want my kids thinking I don't want somebody or the police or anyone thinking he's some grown man and see him as a threat. He was born on Earth Day. I think about the child who's in the opera, and I see my child. He's born on Earth Day. He's an activist. And lastly, I'll wrap up with saying that the conversations that happen in our home are ominous. It is. I think about how my son asked me to take his toy guns outside, and I say no, because I don't want someone to mistake that for a real gun. My husband takes a jog in the morning. Well, at the time, he was law enforcement, and I'm afraid. I'm like, I don't want you jogging in the morning, because Ahmaud Arbery, right? And for my husband to proudly wear the uniform, it is very emotional. And at the same time, it's given this incredible perspective. And what I would say to the audience is those police officers, those Black police officers that seem to have it all together, are holding it together. And I would ask that people take away from this discussion that, these issues they are not binary. You do not have to pick a side. It's so much more complicated than that. It is a profound spectrum of just complex issues. And what I would hope from this is that through the art and the brilliancy of opera, that you can feel, because that's what music does. It brings out feelings. I hope that you can feel what we feel to a certain extent, even for a moment of time, and change your perspective. Because until we all come to the same agreement and stop picking sides, we're not going to move forward and progress as fast. But me as the mother, Crystal, I listen to you and say, that could be my son. I look at you and I say, that could be my husband. And that is a lot to carry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's Crystal, go ahead. You were gonna.
I was just, yeah, I agree with what she's saying. I have 3 sons, So I sympathize with her as well, listening to what she was saying. Because when we as mothers, when we send our kids out, and that's what I was saying in the documentary, we think we have the same opportunities as everyone else, but we don't. The fight is harder for our Black males to be successful. We have to work 3-4 times harder for these particular jobs. And then when you get on these jobs, it's even more difficult. I have a relative that's in the police force, so I do understand what that is, what it's like. But when you're on the other end as a parent sending a Black child out there, it's a different ball game. You know, we love harder, yes, because we don't want nothing to happen, and we probably can go a little overboard with being overprotective. But at the end of the day, when you look at the numbers now, how many walk away like George Foreman and all that? Don't. One life, too many lives.
You're absolutely right. And there's this history. I so appreciate how we have, in a way, it's two of the people in blue with the position of the mother as the mother of sons, of Black sons, which we have in Crystal and Kathy, and the mother who is married to the police officer, which we have in Kathy right here. Thank you so much for bringing this here. We have time for questions, and we have a couple of questions, but please feel free to add in the comments, and they get passed on to us. There are two questions, and I love how these are. Thank you, Janelle. One is for the people on the creative side, Chelsea and Tazwell, the things you learned while creating this opera. And Tazwell is, just to keep everybody fresh in people's minds, because I know you read bios and it's hard to know. Tazwell is both the librettist, the person who really crafted the story, and he is the director. So he wears two hats. This is his first libretto, but he has been working in the theater for a long time, writing plays, conducting plays, writing other sorts of texts. So he's no newcomer to writing how we live, writing the experience and sort of pulling that out. Chelsea is a conductor, and what happens with the performing arts is that you embody it, unlike a book or a picture where the audience today encounters that. The audience today encounters what is created there. And the conductor, it's a little unknown if you're not in sort of the world that uses conductors. It's basically the conductor's oral vision of what happens, what the sound and what to come out. What you hear is based on what the conductor is pulling out of the score. Because, I mean, you hear the music that Janine Tesori wrote, but a conductor is super important for helping the people on stage who sort of give that life, but to really make it happen. So that's why the conductor, even though the conductor is silent, usually during the performance, the conductor makes the oral soundscape, everything we hear and experience. And Tazwell, as the stage director, puts it all like what we see and how we see it. So if we could start with you two, with sort of what were the things you learned as you're creating this work, and then we'll move to our mothers, the wife, that whole sort of world with, as you are thinking about these things and anticipating, I'm thinking you two haven't yet seen the opera, but sort of things you're bringing to it. Kathy, you've already done a great job, both of you, in terms of what music does in that space it holds. So Tazwell or Chelsea, jump right in.
I can start if you like.
Thank you.
I grew up with music, and it wasn't music of my people. It wasn't jazz, blues, or gospels, or Negro spirituals. I spent 7 years of my life in a convent. And so the music that I was introduced to was first liturgical music, because I was an altar boy, and I could recite with Father Farrell the Baltimore Catechism through the Mass. But I had this wonderful nun teacher who came in Tuesdays and Thursdays, Sister Benvenuta, who loved opera. She ran away from home when she was a teenager because she wanted to go into the world of opera. And her mother and father said, "Don't be ridiculous. You could be a nurse, or you could be a secretary, or even better, you can get married and give us grandchildren. Well, she plotted it out how she was going to do it, and she said, I can't run away like a couple of blocks away to a church. I have to go way upstate to Blauvelt, New York, in Rockland County. And she did, and she became a Dominican nun. And so she taught us every Tuesday and Thursday about opera, because that was her love.
I love that.
And I, for most of the class, it was a time for them to take a nap, but I was riveted by the stories in opera. And what I learned from a very early age, listening to, the most outrageous plots in opera, is that anything is possible on the opera stage. Any story is possible. What I did not hear was I did not hear my stories, but Sister Benvenuta, when I was older, by a couple of years later, but still young, I was a child, she said, Mr. Thompson, I have a special favor for you. And she said, come to my office. And I thought, this was her coded way of saying you're in trouble. But no, she introduced me to Paul Robeson and Marian Anderson and Leontine Price. And she took out this, I say it's beautiful because it was, these old RCA Victor records that are shiny and you can almost see your face in it. And she said, I'm going to put this down and listen. And it was Porgy and Bess. And there it was. There was my people. They were singing my, songs, and they were speaking in a way that I could understand. I mean, I could certainly understand the other operas, but it was directly to me, and it had a sound that I remember before I was taken away from my parents and put into the convent. And she told me the story as we were going along, and and it was like a serial. I could only spend like 15 minutes to hear a little bit, and then I waited for the next chapter the following week or whatever, and it went on and on and on for a couple of months before the opera was completed.
Wow.
But what an education. And I'll never forget it. And she explained to me, she said, the singers sing the way they do, and they pronounce the words they do, because that's the way the Gershwins heard it. They weren't making fun of the language of and the dialect. That's the way they heard it. And it's the same way our people, when they sing Negro spirituals, and they have been printed out, it's the way those who printed it out heard it. So from that early, my process was then, when I work on an opera, no matter what it is, I listen to the music over and over and over again. I have had the distinct pleasure when I did this production of Porgy and Bess twice at City Opera. I did it in Cape Town. I did it in Paris. I did it in Madrid. I did it in Tokyo. I did it in Vancouver, all over. And it was televised at one point, and it was nominated for an Emmy for Best Classical Production of the Year and Best Director. But that was Sister Benvenuta. Yeah. And my process from her was, she said these wonderful things to me. She said, the libretto is the scaffold and the construction and the spine of the opera. But the music is the heart and the soul and the spirit. So when I started to work with Janine, I brought that to the fore as well. I just have one other thing to say to Crystal. Be careful when there's a writer in the room and you're speaking, because when you said swallowing pain, I wrote that down. And if it appears in an opera, I'll have to give you a royalty check. But that image, swallowing pain, stuck with me. So thank you.
Anytime. What you guys are doing. I read a little bit about read a little bit about you through Miss Alyssa when she first told me about you, and I'm really looking forward to meeting you and watching the opera. I have a son who has a talent out this world. He's in college right now in Saginaw Valley, and he did Les Mis, and he got the leading role. Jean Valjean.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he blew our mind over it.
Well,
And
that's an operatic role. That really
yeah,
is.
he got the leading role, and he
Wow.
blew us away. And I was telling her about it. So, and when she said, "Have you ever seen an opera?" I said, "Not in person, but as a little girl, I used to always try to mimic different things like." This is gonna be an experience for me, and I have my family really coming to support and watch this opera here, and we're really looking forward to it. And from what I'm
Great.
hearing, the storyline, and when you just introduced to me, as far as when you were at home when you first started writing, and I was like, wow, yeah, this is something I have to see. So I'm excited about it, and I'll be there Sunday to watch it.
Great.
Yeah.
Crystal, it feels like your world is so connected to music. And then to hear, I have a feeling if we were able to talk for like another several hours, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on Sunday because I want to be near you with watching this opera, but with your son who is singing and with you playing instruments, it's just like, wow, there's a providence in having a story that can resonate so deeply for you in music. It
Yeah.
just feels like this is one of those things where there's something bigger moving on. Kathy, did you want to jump in about seeing this opera, or sort of things you're wondering about, or any anticipation?
Well, I think there's a lot of anticipation from the moment that I learned about the opera and just the accuracy of the narrative. But again, as I mentioned earlier, what you can do with music to bring it to life is phenomenal. So I myself have always loved music and I have never been to an opera. And I cannot
Good
tell
stuff
you
waiting for you.
how excited I am. My husband's been to operas, but I have never been to one.
Oh.
How excited I am for my first opera to be Blue and the incredible creation behind this and the sheer authenticity. And I want to thank you, Taswell, thank you, Chelsea, because I was writing some things down, and one of the things that I always say to people is we as a people are always begging and pleading people to hear us and feel us. And I want to thank you for creating an entire whole thing around this where people are going to hear and feel our stories to their bones, because that is what music does. It doesn't matter what color you are, what language you speak, how old you are. It is something in the universe that taps into that. And I believe that your opera will be a breakthrough for so many people to feel something that they never thought was possible. I can't wait to see it. I'm excited. And I just want to thank you.
Oh my goodness, Kathy, the chat is beginning to blow up 100%. Yes, thank you. I'm so excited that we've got two people here who haven't been to opera before. So this is just, you know, there's opera for everyone. I loved opera. I want to share the goodies. And with stories like this, it really is for everyone. Chelsea, jump right in. Forgive me for jumping in.
Yeah.
It looked like
Oh,
you were about
that's
to say something.
okay. It was interesting to hear what Taswell said. He focuses on the music when he works on or listens to opera and that type of thing. And I'm a symphonic conductor. And when I had this opportunity to do Blue, I focused on the story. I really wanted to understand the story because the music, that's my thing. And I feel very comfortable in that language and everything. But words and text and story and context was what I wanted to have the deepest understanding. And I thought I had an understanding of it. But one of the great things about this opera, it's great to do the music of Mozart, Ravel, Debussy, the great European composers, but they're no longer with us. We have composers, Janine Tesori and Taswell, that I can ask questions. And so you ask, what have I learned during this time? Watching Taswell explain the story and in the context, I can understand the words that I see in the libretto, but to hear him explain things and the details and the reasons why has been just really eye-opening for me. That's why I love working with living composers. You can ask them, what did you mean in this section? Why did you write it this way? What inspired you about this story? And to have the writer of this particular piece here with us has been just really eye-opening for myself and for the cast. Last thing I'll say is that conductors and playwrights and composers, we come at music or our art from opposite ends of the spectrum. Tazewell starts with a blank sheet of paper, essentially, and he adds words and words and layers and layers and layers over the course of 6 months, over the course of a year, 2 years, and then he has the entire piece. I, as the conductor, I'm going to try to interpret the piece. So I get the whole thing, I get all the notes, I get all the words and everything together, and then I'm trying to take layer and layer and layer and layer away and organize it so that I can understand the essence of it. So when we have the composer, I can call up Janine Tesori and say, what was your thoughts here? Or why did you write it this way? It just offers so much more of a deeper insight. So in the symphonic world, in the classical music world, we want to hear our war horses. We love our Beethovens and our Gershwins and Dvorak. We love those things, but we can't just rely on that. We have to also be making new music, new opera, new concepts. And what's so great about this opera is it is about what's going on today in our society. And I can't tell you how much it's easy to connect with that. I love our great classical composers, but it's hard for me to connect with people in the 19th century, in the early 20th century. I can, because that's what I made my living doing as a trained musician. But this, what Blue is about, really goes to my soul and makes me feel something as a musician. And that's a nice feeling. That's a nice experience. Thank you for listening to me.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to weave something that Kathy said earlier on, but it seems to be a really apt theme here, that we do not need to think of white policemen or black policemen or different communities, but sort of both and what happens. And Chelsea, as you're talking about the canon, because I know that there's some opera people out there who are thinking, I'm a little nervous when it comes to new stuff. Give me my Mozart, give me my Puccini and my Verdi. And those of us who know Verdi, Puccini, Mozart, love them, but it's not at all an either or. It's really exciting when we can have something that speaks to us, that the person, the people who created this were living in our time. And it's connected to us because we've had the same sort of TV and media and, world events and climate change and, all these, we're going through a similar moment on the planet. And then to have that put into a story that is about today and hopefully not too much more in the future, because we want to get through these issues. But sadly, they're about the past and probably are going to continue a little bit. But we are right here at this moment. Chelsea, you just say it beautifully, that this is something we connect to in a cool, extra, important, profound. I like my word cool and groovy, but profound and compelling ways.
It's universal truths. And
even though we don't have universal experiences, but you're right.
Universal truths. And I think that's why opera has survived all these years from different countries, from our country, is because it does go to those universal truths that we see. But there's not been something like Blue. And that's what is so powerful about this moment. And that's what a performance is. It's a moment in time. You come in, you have the experience, and then you go home. You're not going to go home with a foamy "We're number one" or a cup or a T-shirt or you're not going to go home with souvenirs. You're going to go home with the same thing but hopefully you might have been transported or transformed in some way.
Going back to that idea that we all are sharing the moment together, it's the universality, I think, is how it brings us together as humans, this
Yes.
human experience. And this is not a story just about a Black family. This is a story about everyone who has been paying attention on the planet. This, sadly, it's not just about Crystal. I don't know where she went, but who has lost a son to police violence. But this is about to all of us with our brown skin. This is about to all mothers, no matter what happens, you're feeling stuff as a kid, and accidents and terrible things happen. This is about what it's like to have friends and neighbors and to learn new experiences. This is about being human.
Yes, and this, when I first got here, I met the cast, Kenneth Kellogg and Andy Moore. Kenneth is the father, Andy Moore is the mother, and we were just starting. I think we maybe had one rehearsal or heading to our rehearsals when we were just meeting each other, and they were talking about how powerful it is for them because they have boys, they have young boys, and when Kenneth did this the first time, I believe, Tazwell, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think he just had a baby boy.
Yes.
And so it really affected him profoundly to do this opera, and to lose a child, but also to protect your child, and it gives thoughts and feelings towards that as well.
Yes, and to love your child, Tazwell.
Andy Marie Moore, who's new to the opera, she plays the mother, and indeed she is the mother of two boys.
Oh.
And talk about the process, and that what's wonderful about the opera is that whoever sings a certain role, they bring who they are and what they've experienced to that role. At this afternoon's rehearsal, there's an aria in Act 2, Scene 2, where Andy, who sings the role of the mother,
Yes.
was devastating. And because she's a mother in real life, and this was about losing her child and begging God, begging anyone, please bring my child, my baby back to me. I don't care what shape he's in, just bring him back to me. Now, I have heard this aria sung several times by different singers, and they were brilliant, but no one has devastated me the way Andy Marie went. And Naomi, you've seen this opera several times. You'll see what I mean. It was etched in my heart and memory, and it will be forever. And this was just a rehearsal for her first time. And it was just a great, great moment in rehearsal. And that's what I also love about what we do, what Chelsea and I do, is we're in a room and we have to have an immediate family with this cast, and we do, and it deepens, and they bring their training and their coaching and their life experiences, and then you're transformed.
Oh, thank you for sharing that with us, because once you've been to this opera, it sort of stays with you. And I'm transformed seeing that opening bit. I hadn't seen that before, and I was so glad there was the other documentary, which was powerful, but I had seen it, but I was just like, the tears were coming down. It is so powerful what you've given us. I noticed that we are a little over time. I am a terrible moderator because I just don't want to stop. And I want to, hopefully, Kathy and Crystal will also hear this, but I want to thank you all for sharing this. These are hard topics. Usually when I moderate a panel, I sort of call on people individually. And I know it was hard to say who wants to speak, but I did that deliberately because I wanted to give you the space to speak when you were ready. And I want to thank you for sharing and opening up. There's a huge amount of emotional work that goes into, you guys are artists, and so you're so good at performing it artistically, but also talking about it is very hard too. So thank you for that space and sharing this with us. I cannot wait to see you both in person next week at these performances. And I want to encourage everybody who's watching this, and even in the future, if you happen to see this, go see a performance of Blue. See it in Toledo on the 26th and the 28th. Of this year. In the chat, there is something that says, where is it going next? And I think that, Taswell, is it going to the Netherlands?
To the Netherlands, and then to Washington National Opera in DC,
Great.
and then to the English National Opera in London. And there are other companies that are negotiating, and I'm too superstitious to mention who they are.
Well, this is just getting going because the pandemic sort of shut everything down. But I have seen it in Detroit at the Aretha Franklin Amphitheater last September. I got to see it in Seattle, and now in Toledo. I will see it whenever I can, and I will even try to use some of my professor research funds to fly to see it. I don't know if I can make Denmark yet, but this is an opera that you get to see and live through. Thank you. I am a few minutes late, but I'm going to pass the microphone back to Alyssa. Thank you and thank you, Crystal, and thank you and Kathy for being with us. Thanks, Alyssa.
Thank you all so much. Thank you to everyone for bringing who you are to this conversation. Thank you to everyone joining us tonight, and to our incredible presenters, Dr. Naomi Andre, Taswell Thompson, Maestro Chelsea Tipton II, Crystal Harris, and Kathy Tucker. A huge thank you to Stephanie Elton, who produced this live stream behind the scenes, ensuring everything ran smoothly. The recording of tonight's panel will be available online soon on Facebook, YouTube, and ToledoOpera.org. To learn more about our other upcoming events, please follow Toledo Opera on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. To sign up for our monthly newsletter, click on ToledoOpera.org and scroll to the bottom of the page. If you enjoyed this virtual event and would like to share your feedback with Toledo Opera, please email me at agreenberg@ToledoOpera.org. Now, if you didn't RSVP for this event but would like to share your feedback with us, please email Luke Serrano at lserrano@ToledoOpera.org, or follow the link to the survey. Oh, I'm not going to put that in the chat. Never mind. If you'd like to order tickets for Blue, please call our box office during business hours at 419-255-SING, or order tickets online at ToledoOpera.org. Our upcoming events are Blue Day at Mott Branch Library on Thursday, August 18th from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Preserving the African American Legacy in Law Enforcement, also on Thursday at 7 p.m. in collaboration with the African American Police League Toledo Police Museum. And you can RSVP to that event on Eventbrite. Finally, our documentary film Blue Stories of Toledo will air on WGTE on Sunday at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. That's Sunday, August 28th. You can see Blue at the Valentine Theater on Friday, August 26th and Sunday, August 28th. And last but certainly not least, the Blue After Party with the cast and creatives will be here at Toll House on Friday, August 26th at 10:30 p.m. Again, thank you all so much for coming. And you know what? I will put the link to the exit survey in the chat. So thank you all for coming. Have a great evening.